Hi guys, welcome to Dan's Playground. If you're here, it's probably because you're concerned about your Ford's PTU unit, otherwise known as a power transfer unit. A lot of people will call it a transfer case, and that's basically what it is. This one we're working on a 08 Lincoln MKX, same as your Ford Edge. This one started acting up, I want to say about 90,000 miles, started puking the oil out the top. And I went ahead and I changed the oil in it twice, trying to avoid its demise, but once it starts puking oil, you're going to have to replace it. And this is the old unit here. Here it is, it's tore apart. This is what you find where it's all full of the oil that's been cooked. Why was it cooked? It was cooked because your catalytic converter is next to it. There's not enough airflow moving around it. Ford says that the oil should last the lifetime of the vehicle. Now they're saying about 20 to 30,000 miles. So the solution to this is to replace the PTU, which I have one here. Most of the PTUs you will purchase do not have a drain plug in them. This one does now. I went ahead and tapped that and put that in. They will recommend that you put it here on the side because it's structurally stronger, that you compromise the case when you put it there in the bottom. Myself, I couldn't see a reason why putting a 1/4" drain plug in the bottom was an issue. So that's what we did, and so far it's worked out fine. To take this apart and separate it, it's not a problem. You can take it apart, drill it out and tap it, and then you get all the metal shavings out from the aluminum case. This is a project. It's not something that I'd want to do in my driveway. You do need your tools, your impacts. If you have the cordless, that's great, or air, whatever you do, that's fine. But if you're doing it by hand, it's not gonna be very pleasant because a lot of the bolts they use are just coated in Loctite, the blue type. But it's not just a small part of the bolt; it'll be like the length of the bolt, and that can be an issue when you start getting into your low motor mount. When you start getting into some of your frame attachments, the cradle itself, that's where your impacts really come in handy. To take this out, if you've done a strut, that's not a problem. This is basically the difficulty of doing a strut. I mean, it's not really hard. It just takes time and some wrenching. We started off right away doing these. Of course, you take the disc off and everything. That's pretty easy. You got the strut here. That's straightforward. And pulling the half shaft out. Removing the 4 nuts for the cradle. You want your impact because again, that's your Loctite and everything. The cradle itself, as you can see here, it's not supported. You don't need a jack underneath it. The motor itself is supported by your motor mounts there at the top. So that's just fine. Some people have dropped and removed their drive shaft. I did not. I just went ahead and bolted it and left it there. It was fine. The muffler pipe through there, some people have dropped the whole line. You don't need to. I just went ahead and separated where the wire pipe is, and that wasn't a problem. That came out pretty easy. As I said, this thing it has the catalytic converter by it, and your cat is sitting there like this. And this is your pipe. There are 4 bolts that hold this up attached to your exhaust manifold. They're difficult to get to. You can try and use your torch to get in there to break them loose. I went ahead and used a breaker bar and just worked them slowly back and forth. And they talk to you very easily. They chirp as you do it, back and forth, and they got these out. What we did find was that where this attaches to this cat, you don't have to unbolt it. You can leave this whole thing attached and it'll drop out of there. There's lots of room once you drop this cradle to remove this pipe assembly and this cat. It'll all drop out. And taking the PTU out, that once you have the cable drop, it's not a problem at all. Comes right out. one of the easiest things of the operation. Actually, the one thing I would recommend is that you replace your lower motor mount. This is the new one. The old one was covered in oil, just like that PTU there is. It's got all the oil all over it and everything. That motor mount was soaked. I really don't want to do this again, so we're just putting a new motor mount on there. They're pretty cheap. And that's really what you run into on this. It takes a little bit of time. Don't rush it. Take your time. You do need to have it up fairly high. For example, I went ahead and there, you're 2 feet off the ground. You better have some good jacks. Got it there on the subframe on that and everything. Big vehicle's solid. It's not going anywhere. On this PTU, Ford says that the fluid will last the lifetime of the vehicle. Well, sadly it does not, again because of the catalytic converter. But this, if you take it to a shop, you're probably talking anywhere from $25,000 to $3,000 to do this. You can buy them as cheap as $300. For a job like this, I really prefer to buy a brand name. In this case, that is a Dorman. I bought through Amazon. My biggest fear in doing this project was the exhaust system. Anytime you get over 100,000 miles from these vehicles, particularly in Kansas, with the corrosion they use for the de-icing on the highway, you know your exhaust is paying a price for that. And for the most part, it wasn't that bad. The worst part was where this comes down and goes to the exhaust going to your catalytic converter, or I'm sorry, your muffler. These were the ones that were most exposed, and the nuts were just corroded. We tried several tools to take them off. The impact, we used the impact. It just ground up the nuts. Tried some other quick ways of doing it. It didn't work. And the only way that we got them off was using heat. That was the only way to do it. And some of this stuff, I'm not like this donut here, I'm not going to replace it. But your threads for the most part are pretty good. I'm going to have to dress this one up a little bit where they use heat to get this off. We did break one stud, and that was on the front cat where it comes down. And what I did, these are pressed in there. There's splines where this matches with the flange on the cat, and it broke off back here. And so what I did was I went in and took a Dremel and I just cut this off flush, and I cut the top off too. And what they had to do was heat this up, the little bit that was left inside, and it took a little bit, and when they got it hot enough, they were tapping on it and they were able to get it out. If that had not worked, I was looking at drilling it out. I wasn't really looking forward to that. And my fear was if we banged too much on this, because this is again attached to the top of your exhaust manifold, whether we start bending things or you just break the metal up there. But we avoided all that. When I put this back together, there is a metallic O-ring that goes in here. I'm putting a new one of those in. Your heat shields, you do have to bolt them. There's not much room for that to get this thing out, but it's doable. It's not the end of the world. It just takes a little bit of time to do it. But again, of all the parts of this project that concerned me, this was the issue, was the exhaust. Not dropping the PTU, not taking the half shad out or the strut. It was the exhaust, and half of it went well and half of it not so well. If we didn't have the heat, I would be in a bind. And some people, what they do is they just go ahead and they just buy new parts. They just whole new tubing. Maybe they have to replace their cat. If you don't have access to heat, if you don't have the means to drill, because you are going to need to use a hard bit if you want to drill through this stuff. Don't recommend it. It's a lot easier to put some heat on it for a minute or so and then pop it out. it's not that hard of a project. It really isn't. It takes time. Most of this has been actually spent on waiting. I do this in my evenings, so come out here for an hour or two and wrench on it and make progress. And of course, the first time you're learning as you do it, so it takes more time. Now that I've done this, I know I can crack this out a whole lot faster, and I know what I would attack first. When I did start this, I did soak all my studs with PB Blaster, everything, 2 or 3 times at least, trying to get things ready for them to come out. That seemed to help some. It wasn't perfect, or didn't work as well as I had hoped. But the more tools you have for this sort of job, the easier it goes. It's doable. You shouldn't have to go spend $3 grand at the dealership for this.